So, welcome to the show, everybody. This is No Ice, Please. I got my main man, my guest right here, Mike Chapple. Mike, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, Mike. Good, Mike. We were having the conversation about your new song.
My new song
Because first we did the Metaverse song, which is
now is different,
Now Is
and it
Different.
is different.
And everything is different since then.
What?
Everything is different since then, right?
Yes.
And then
And
your
then
new song. Tell
It's
us about your new
called
song.
The Pushback.
The Pushback. What is it about?
It's about the world being historically a mess
Yes.
since globalization, since Christopher Columbus, or at least maybe, well, actually before that,
Before that.
and then trying to people coming together from the left and the right, working together.
Both parties.
Forget parties, but both followers of parties who are going to just work
Yeah.
together without the parties,
Uh-huh.
and putting aside all their not all their differences, but like saying we have more in common than we disagree with each other,
Yeah.
and we want the world to be a fair, better place for everybody. That's what we have in common.
You were saying the song kind of referenced Bob Dylan in the style of his.
Okay.
How
Actually, I'm talking about. Since I talked to you last, I have
Yeah.
new songs. But the song we're talking about, that song is about. That's right. That song it is more Bob Dylan influenced than my other songs. Although all my songs are Bob Dylan influenced, but no, that one's called Subcellular Cognitive Warfare Blues. The one we were talking about before,
Okay.
and that one is about this neuroscientist at Georgetown.
Okay.
Okay.
That's right. You were saying he was giving the speech. You were saying that he was giving the speech, correct?
He gave a speech at Lawrence Livermore Laboratories,
Yeah.
a presentation to these scientists about the state of warfare for advanced warfare. And so the mind is the battlefield for the next war.
Really?
And so he's talking about, he's a neuroscientist who also, he's connected with the Department of Defense, and he teaches at Georgetown. And so he's talking about what you can do to the enemy's brain to win the war.
And this is the research that he did, right? This is nothing that like he's saying this is the next warfare. This is the research that he was doing for the Department of Defense.
Yeah, with the Department of
With
Defense.
the
I don't know how you phrase that
Yeah,
exactly,
however
but
you-
yes,
yeah, I
yeah.
see what
So
you're
he
saying.
does it with the Department of Defense, and he's saying, here's what we do: we can assess how the brain works, then we can figure out how to get to it, access the brain, and then we can affect it.
The 3 A's. You
The
were
three
talking about,
A's:
yeah.
assess, affect. Yeah, and so that's the line that I have in the song.
Okay.
He also talks about drugs, bugs, toxins, and devices. Those are the ways you get to the brain. You can do it with toxic aerosols. You can do it with by bugging the room, or all different
All
ways.
different ways.
Yeah, and so he talks about that, and so I put that line: drugs, bugs, toxins, and devices.
Oh, wow.
That's another line in the song. And then he says, yeah, everything you think, you hope, you dream, you love, you hate fits in the brain. It's a function of that organ.
Wow.
And so I put all that in the song. So drugs, bugs, toxins, and devices, everything you think, you hope, you dream, you love, you hate fits in the brain. It's a function of that organ. And then it's kind of about that. The first two verses are about that.
How did you come across this person? Like, how did you come across him?
I listened to someone called Allison McDowell. She has her own podcast, Wrench in the Gears.
Wrench in
her
the
own
Gears.
Substack, I guess you call it,
Okay.
right? It's similar to, right? They're similar, Substack. And she showed a video of this guy, a clip, James Giordano, about him giving his lecture. He's not trying to hide it, or it's not a conspiracy. He's like bragging about it. He's a professional, well-connected, well-funded
Person,
guy.
Wow.
And so I just said, well, I better take a look at this. And I
And
did.
Just after that clip that you saw, you decided to look at his whole entire speech.
Yeah, his whole talk, which is about an hour and a half.
Okay.
And you can find it, just James Giordano. And then Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and it'll come up, and you can listen to it, and you'll just go, oh my God.
Wow.
This was what they could do 8 years ago.
And that's what inspired the song, pretty much.
That's
and
what
the
kicked it
mixer.
off.
Yeah, I see, okay.
Then I added in all other kinds of stuff about what's happening in the world, and
What made you get into all this kind of research? Like, how did it all start? Like, how did you get into
How did I get into
your
it?
research that you get into?
Well,
Yes.
so I always wanted to be in a band. When
Mm.
I saw the Beatles the first time,
Oh God.
right on the Jack Parr show, the Beatles came on.
Hmm.
I thought, wow. I thought that's what I want to do.
That's your calling right there.
But I didn't have the confidence to do it, so I
Mhm.
didn't do it till I was like 30 years old.
Hmm.
And then when I started to, and I'd already gone through the 60s by that point.
But
Right?
you were saying you were studying to be a doctor, correct?
My dad wanted me to be a doctor, so I wanted to be a musician, but I went with my dad's idea until like to get into college. I was
Yeah.
a biology major, and then the 1960s happened.
The
And
years
that
of
just-
questioning.
What?
The years of questioning.
It was like a wave of consciousnness and change and hope, and I mean real hope, and questioning everything.
Yeah.
It's like it just like you're on your little track, you're going here and you're going to college and then you're going to go to medical school or whatever, and then this wave comes across and squish. No, you're not doing any of that stuff. You're doing something else. And so that's when I started to question stuff. But when I finally got around to putting a band together, I thought, if I'm going to write songs, and I knew about the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
I said, I better know more about it. If I'm going to write songs and be performing them in front of people, I want to make sure I have this much more grounded than I didn't do the research at the time. I was part of the 60s,
Okay.
anti-war, civil rights, women's rights, environment stuff. I was part of that, but I didn't really ground it so much. So that's when I started looking into so that's when I started doing research, and so
Okay.
then when I finally got the band, that's when that's what I did and so this was that I started the band in 1980, but
What was the name of the band?
the first one was called the Gluons.
The Gluons.
Gluons, which is like the smallest particle in the universe. There's like gluons and protons and electrons, and so gluons.
Wow.
It was just a name. So that was the first band.
Okay.
But when I wanted to later, like now when I'm back, so I did music from like 1980 to 1990, and then I did other stuff. And now that I'm back here in Denver, I'm doing music again. But I have that habit of researching stuff.
And you were telling me about a play you wrote. What was this? What year was it?
So it was 1987.
1987. And
Yeah.
what was this play about? It was. You broke it down a little bit, but what was it about again?
So the play is called Dr. Antonioni's Imaginary Disease. Imaginary Disease. And so I had been in bands like from 1980 to 85 or 6 or something. I wasn't in a band. My friend Marilyn McGannity, who ran the Mercury Cafe, at one point she said, she had some space, and she said, why don't you do something? Do whatever you want to do. I said, well, I'm not
Because she
in a
knew
band.
you were in the band, right?
What?
She knew you were in the band.
She knew I had been in bands,
Oh,
but I
okay.
wasn't in a band at that point. So I
Okay.
thought, well, I have this information. What can I do instead of write songs about it? And
Yeah.
so I just, I'll try writing this play. And that's what it was about, this doctor who creates a new disease. He takes symptoms from all kinds of diseases, and colds and headaches and sore throats and not being able to taste things and stuff from like whether it's the flu or pneumonia or cancer or whatever. He takes those symptoms and he puts them all into a new name-defined disease, and he calls it Antonioni's disease. And then he gets his friends at the National Institute of Health and the pharmaceutical companies. He's well connected.
And this is something you wrote.
Yeah, this is something I wrote. This is dark comedy.
Yeah.
Just me playing the doctor, getting up there, going, "Hello, my name is Michelangelo Antonioni, doctor." And I just come out with my spiel and tell a couple of jokes, and to all kinds of audiences. I performed it at the medical school. I performed it at the theological seminary.
So you were saying that you played as a doctor that invented an imaginary disease.
Yes.
That pretty much matches what's going on with this COVID
It's
thing
pretty
right now.
close.
It's pretty close.
It's pretty close. So yeah, he comes out with the new disease. He comes out with a vaccine, makes it mandatory. It's a series of 3 shots.
1987, you wrote this.
3 shots for every man, woman, child, newborn even, in the world. Then once everybody's taken the vaccine, he's going to redefine the symptoms that he created, he says, okay, well, let me go back to the other diseases, and my disease is now cured. And so he would be a total success and be proud of himself and get a Nobel Prize. So that was his strategy for how to do it. That was kind of how you make it's kind of a strategy is how you would create an imaginary disease. And, his thing is cycles of fear and reassurance. So first you scare everybody. You make it totally, everybody's going to die. And then you have reassurance. Everybody's going to die, but if you give us trust and control, we'll save you. So he knows that. And
doesn't that spook you out that you kind of like wrote something that's going on? Well, kind of
no, well, that didn't spook me out because so I wrote that in 87, and then there was, after that was Ebola and whatever, West Nile and
all these other
ones. Yeah. And they tried to make those pretty scary, but they didn't catch. So all those are happening. I'm not scared at all because I know how it works.
Wow.
So I know the deal, and so I was never scared about it. And it was more. I didn't think it could be this bad. Like I didn't think.
You didn't think it can go this far, even.
I didn't think they'd have lockdowns.
Yeah.
I didn't think they'd have lockdowns and destroy economies. And I knew they would take risks, like they would inject people with stuff that maybe was bad for them, and they might, But I didn't think they'd do it on purpose. I thought they'd just do it to make money. I didn't think they'd do it to control society. So I got a lot right, but I didn't get it all right.
Yeah. So do you think you writing that play helped you write this new song on like the AAAs pretty much?
Yeah, it helped me see a lot of it. That was a step. But I would say, I'd say the 60s was a big step. Like that, like I said, it just blew me off. I was like a Republican at that point.
Oh, God.
Right. Yeah. I was like a Republican, and then I became kind of a Democrat, and then I became...
Wait a minute.
Then I became like a...
You can't go both sides.
Then I became like a... Neither. I became like an independent.
Yeah, independent.
Like a lot of people are independent.
Very interesting. That's very interesting that you wrote that play, and then for it to tie into what's going on today. But at the same time, it helped you write this new song that you have.
All my songs, yeah. It's the idea is.
What got you into research? I mean, obviously it was the '60s, but like, what got you into researching even more? Was it something that you saw during the '60s, or was it a subject, or like was it Vietnam or something like that? That you're like, wait a minute, we got to question more stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think I was always questioning stuff, like always. Like my friends used to joke about it, like Mike's going to ask, why are we going to do this? I was always that way. But when I realized I was going to go out in front of the public, and whether it was singing songs or telling about medicine and science, I thought, I got to get this as right as I can get it, And so that's like, because I'm going to be talking to people, and people are. I don't want to make it any more worse than it. I don't want to make it worse than it already is. Yeah. So I did my due diligence as much as I could, and I had been, since I was a biology major in college, for the science stuff. I wasn't afraid of it. Like I knew I could learn it. I just had to read it and learn it. It wasn't. You didn't have to be a genius to read a textbook on biology. So I if I'd have been coming from philosophy or something, I might have been intimidated by the biology of it, but I wasn't.
But so. You weren't. You actually had a background in some kind of medical.
A little bit, scientific, a little bit, for a couple of years in college.
Where you were like, well, wait a minute, this is kind of valid. Where it's like somebody can invent a disease and then
you could.
What inspired to write you that play?
What is what?
What inspired you to write that play?
Well, at first it was the AIDS epidemic, and like my neighbors were like totally freaked out, like. And the AIDS, I don't know if you probably don't know about it. So before there was COVID, there was AIDS, HIV AIDS, and like people were totally freaked out. Not as much as today, but still houses got burned down because people were thinking that person might spread it. And people were afraid they could catch it from, going to the supermarket and stuff like that. So all that was in there, but it wasn't. So my friends were freaked out, and like they were, Oprah was saying 90% of the world is going to die. I mean, it was like a big thing, but then it became focused on just smaller subgroups, not everybody. It was like if you could stay away from homosexuals and
because homosexuals was one of the main reasons.
Well, it eventually.
What mainstream is what they said was that homosexuals was.
They blamed it on hemophiliacs, with the 4 H's, I guess. Homophiliacs, homosexuals, hookers, and whatever the other H's were.
Whatever the other H's were, huh?
Yeah. So,
Time out, time out.
are we still happening? Or are we?
No, we're good, we're good, we're good.
So,
There
testing
we
1,
go.
2. We're back in the game.
Yeah, so you were saying it was the mainstream were saying that the homosexuals was
They were saying
supposedly
there's
the
a
reason, yeah.
yes. They're saying there's a virus that's being spread
Mhm.
by this group, and that it's going to spread. If it's in the population, there's no way you can keep. If it's a sexually transmitted disease, eventually it's going to get everybody. It's going to get out of the small groups and affect everybody. And if we don't have a vaccine or we don't have a successful cure, everyone's going to get this, and most people are going to die from it. So it was a big thing. And and my neighbors were totally freaked out. And I said, well, I don't know what's going on, but I'll look into it. I said, I don't think whatever they're saying, it's not going to be this bad. And so then I just started doing my research, and I called the National Cancer Institute, and I found out who the scientist who disagreed with this position was, and I called them up, and I was volunteering for KGNU radio at that point, and I had access. I called some of these scientists up, and then I went out to visit them in California.
Oh, so you actually spoke to these people. It's not a research that you read and came up with.
Sometimes I read, and there was a
you actually
conference.
spoke to some of these
Yes.
researchers
Yes.
that were doing the actual field work.
Yes. And there was a conference, and I think it was called AIDS Medicine and Miracles. And I used to say it should be called AIDS Medicine and Money.
Yeah, right.
But in Boulder, and I, as a KGNU volunteer, I got access to the scientists who presented in that, and I talked to them, and there were gay activists who were challenging the mainstream story, and I talked to them. So I got a good range of pro
all
and con.
aspects.
Yeah. And so that's how but it started with my neighbors being like freaked out, like, what, and I said, oh, I'll look into this. I didn't know that I was going to. And then I had that information, and coincidentally, then my friend said, Marilyn said, why don't you do something? And I thought, well, I'll put it together this way as a play. I'll pretend I'm the doctor who invented the whole thing, and see how it will play out.
What was the response that you got from people?
It was wild. It was
Really?
great. Yeah. So first we did it just as a one-time experiment, and then maybe 5 or 6 people there. But Marilyn liked it, and she said, Mike, make it a little longer, and we'll invite the press. And we invited Westward and Denver Post and the News, and they came, and they liked it. They thought it was funny.
So the local newspapers came out,
And then it was.
and they wrote a little
Then it was
article. on
easy
you.
money. It was easy money. It was like, people came because they read the reviews, and they were positive reviews, and it's like it was just a small little theater, so
Yeah.
we filled it up, and just ran it for 2 or 3 years, and
Oh my God!
it was like the longest
it was-
running play in Denver for a while. It was just the weekends, but it was the longest running one.
Wow! And you said that you didn't break character afterwards; that you would actually take audience questions.
So I come out as the doctor, and he speaks for about 45 minutes, and then I look at my watch, like, well, I got a few more minutes here. Any questions, And people go, well, first they go, what? Like, how are we supposed to? Who are we talking to? Because they weren't sure if I was
So
the
you
doctor or
sold
me
it,
or
like,
whatever.
You sold it, like you were just.
Some people I really sold. One woman said, "You're not really a doctor." It's like, oh, well, obviously I'm not.
It's the
But
play,
she was
lady.
like, challenge me. I know. So
It's a
some
play,
people
man.
did buy it. Some people did buy it. It was good, and it was fun. So then they would ask me all kinds of questions about everything. I mean, about my invention, or how am I going to get people to, how am I going to sell it to the regular public? Or they would ask me questions about medical problems that they had, like endometriosis, which I didn't know even what it was. But because I knew that somebody asked me, I bluffed my way through it the first time, and then I went home and looked up what is endometriosis and how does it work.
So you would study the questions they'd
Yes.
ask you, and then you'd come home.
Just
and
in
do-
case, because I figured, well, if one person asks me,
somebody else is going to ask.
the next time I want to be ready. So when they ask me, I'll blow their minds.
Oh my God, Mike!
And it ran long enough to make that worthwhile, and it was my only job at the time. So I went down to the medical school library, hours a week, and read all these journals, and Journal of Medical Association, History of Medicine,
kind of
History of
papers that doctors would put out and stuff like
There's
that. You would-
journals. There's like lots, and I got my favorite journals and the American Medical Association's newspaper, and what was happening with Hillary Clinton trying to change the insurance policy before Obama and all that stuff. And so I got into all that stuff. And why not? I'm going to be talking to people about it. I
So
want to be
you try to get as informed as possible about the situation. or
Yeah,
about
and
the
I had
play.
the time. I had the time and the motive and the inclination. So what the heck?
Wow. So what made you get back into music?
Well, after a while, I got what got me back into music? For one reason or another, I moved out to New Jersey and kind of left my musical theatrical side and got into senior softball and substitute teaching. And although I decided part of that was I decided I was going to write a history book on the history of medicine and public health because I got into an argument with Noam Chomsky, he's like the leading person on the left. On the left, like he's like the leading intellectual on the left. And everybody should know who he is, but most people don't know who he is. But anyway, so I got in an argument with him about AIDS and about the causes and stuff. So I thought it was, and I admired him greatly, but he disagreed with me greatly. So
Were you surprised that he disagreed with you, or did you?
I wasn't surprised that he disagreed with me, and I didn't care that he disagreed with me. I didn't really want him to get into this, because he's got enough criticisms coming at him without saying what I was saying. But what I did want him to respect my opinion and to to say, well, he was saying things that were wrong about it, and I just want him to just have another perspective on it. But he didn't go that way. He
stood his ground.
He stood. Well, yeah. He basically said, "Mike, you shouldn't even be talking about this."
Oh my God! What do you know about it, huh?
Right? Who are you?
Yeah.
And I'd already been performing it at the medical school, and scientists have been
And
challenged.
obviously he didn't know that, so
No, he didn't care about that.
But he was questioning.
Well,
your
yeah.
curiousness, if you will.
Yeah. So I went out, when I was out in New Jersey, I decided I'd try to get some credentials as a historian so that I could it wouldn't be like performance artist, ex-gluon musician. It would be like a historian, Mike Chapple would be that. So I made connections with this medical historian, and he got me a job with the Endocrine Society, which is like one of the leading medical societies in any area.
Wow.
And so I worked for them for like 7 years, interviewing, oral historian, interviewing top endocrinologists in the world, like Nobel laureates and all that stuff. So I had to teach myself endocrinology in order to ask them good questions. But so for 7 years I did that out there, and did senior softball and taught preschool. And those were the things I focused on then, not performance stuff. And that was good for a while. But then I just decided I really wanted to be writing songs and singing to people and performing and stuff.
Everything that you gathered throughout the years, all the information that you gathered throughout the years, you wanted to put it to life in music and back into music.
Yeah.
And then you came back to Colorado. That's when you came back to
Yeah,
Colorado.
about 2 years ago. 2 years ago this March.
Wow. And that's what pretty much was like, hey, well, now that I have an opportunity to get back into music, I'm going to write these songs of information that I've gathered through the years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could do theater again too but right now it's
If it
just
calls you jump right back into it. If they asked you to do your play again, would you do it?
Yeah, if it
Or
got the
would
right
you
kind of support to do it, it would be hard for me because I'm
Or
older
would you
now.
select an actor? Like, would you select somebody that can pull it
It'd
off?
be tough for someone to pull. They'd have to be really dedicated in order to they could memorize it, but to take the questions,
yeah, that
they'd
would be
have to
something else.
be up on it. I mean, really up on it. You'd have to read all the science and be able to put it together in a critical way.
On the fly.
On the fly, yeah.
Wow.
And there's a lot of stuff, but it'd be something to think about. But I'm happy playing guitar and hanging out with musicians and doing that.
Do you have an EP coming out? Are you working on an album, or what are you working on right now?
So yeah, I don't have anything out yet, but my friend
Well, we have the video, the first video.
Right,
have it.
and now we call that band Roller Coaster.
Roller Coaster. Okay.
Roller Coaster.
Roller Coaster.
And that's my friend Henry Bruz Rowland. He writes the music and does all the recording and the producing and arranging. I write the lyrics
and you
and sing it.
That's a
So
great combo, right?
it works good for us. Yeah.
it works great. He has to just worry about the music. You can just worry about your vocals.
Yep.
It's just a great
Yep.
combination like that.
No, it's good.
That's
It's
great.
it's
So
we're lucky.
besides this new song that you're working on, are you going to be putting out an album or anything like that?
Well,
or-
yeah. I mean, I think there's different ways to do it nowadays. There's CDs, but people don't use that. I guess there's little flash drive things
Mhm.
you can do. So I think we'll probably have to figure out Spotify or whatever those other things are. He
The
he knows that
platforms, yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So we've got 3 songs now
Mhm.
that are ready to go,
Mhm.
and we probably want to have maybe 2 or 3 more, and then we'll put out.
Kind of like an EP. You're gonna
Yeah,
put like an EP?
whatever.
Yeah,
We'll
okay.
put that
okay.
out, and then
like a
send it to-
5-track EP, and then
Yeah.
you just throw it out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's the way to go. You know, I mean, nowadays you don't really have to do a full length album. I guess you can pull out an EP and then see the response, and then you can put a
Yeah.
full length album
I
that
don't
way.
know.
Because full length albums take a lot of time, especially the way you guys work. I mean, I can hear the music and its construction. I can tell that he takes a while to make it because it sounds very good.
Thanks.
It
Yeah.
sounds very
No,
good. So
yeah.
I mean, I can tell that it takes a thought into it, not just putting it together and just putting
Yeah.
it out there.
Yeah.
I can tell that he
No,
really
he's-
constructs his music.
Yeah, yeah, he's good.
That's
and he
really
takes
good.
it. Yeah, and it does take time, but it's a lot of fun once you figure out how to work together with somebody else.
The
And-
chemistry, yes.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
That's very good. That's
Um,
very. Do you have any social platforms where people can find you,
Not
or are
right
you
now.
working on that?
Yeah,
right
we'll
now?
work on that. You can add it into one of your later.
Yes,
broadcasts.
no worries, no
Yeah.
worries, no
Yeah.
worries. So, besides all this other stuff, what do you do on your spare time, Mike? You just continue.
I'm
to research?
retired,
Oh, okay.
so I don't have any spare time.
The
It's all one big.
spare
thing.
time.
It's all one big. Yeah, I mean, everybody should have. Everybody should be retired. Everybody should have their own time.
Do you
Like
think you'll
maybe
write
2
another
or 3
play?
hours.
You
What?
think you'll write another play?
Oh, I have a couple in the works, but I don't know if I'll ever get to them. I would like to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you teach yourself too how to write a play, or did you already have some kind of knowledge? in
No,
doing
I
that?
just made it up as I went along.
Wow.
But the first one was relatively easy because it's just one character
Mhm.
talking to the audience.
So it's kind of like a speech thing.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
kind of like a speech. And the new ones I'm working on, I think that says card full now.
Oh, don't worry, we still got that.
We're
one.
still good?
We're still
Okay.
good.
So to write characters and dialogue and stuff like that, which I am also working on,
Mhm.
that's more difficult. But I read a lot of I've read a lot of Shakespeare, and I'm kind of taking some of Shakespeare's plays, parts of them, and then trying to rewrite them
Yeah.
as my play, like
Oh my God.
and
Mike.
so that helps me with the dialogue and all that stuff, and
Mhm.
so it's fun, but it's a project for that one.
Any last words for the camera, Mike?
Any last words for the camera?
What would you say?
Uh,
Be yourself. What would you tell the world out there?
What would I what?
What message would you give the world out there?
Listen to Sabino.
Okay.
Follow his channel.
There you go.
He's a great guy.
Okay.
He's going to present a lot of really good ideas to everybody.
There you
And,
go, Mike. Thank
yeah,
you, Mike.
that's good.
Thank you. Appreciate you, man. Well, that was a great talk. And I'm pretty sure we'll have a part 2 on this. So
All right.
this ain't the last one. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning into the show. We'll see you later. All right.